Jake Morrison sat in the white medical chair and stared at his new arm. The metal fingers moved when he thought about moving them, but they felt cold and strange. He flexed the mechanical hand and watched the silver joints bend and straighten. It worked perfectly, but it was not his arm. His real arm was gone, blown off in the last battle on that distant planet, 6 months ago. The medical bay was quiet, except for the soft hum of machines. Dr. Lisa Hayes walked over with her tablet in hand. She had been trying to help him for weeks, but Jake did not want her help. He did not want anyone's help. "Jake, you need to talk to someone about what happened," Dr. Hayes said in her gentle voice. "The nightmares, the anger, the way you push everyone away. This is not healthy." Jake looked up at her with his one good eye. The other side of his face was covered in scars from the explosion that took his arm. The scars went from his temple down to his jaw, twisting his skin into ugly lines. He touched the scarred skin with his metal fingers. "There is nothing to talk about," Jake said. "My team is dead. I failed them. That is all there is to know." Dr. Hayes sat down in the chair next to him. "You did not fail them, Jake. You led 12 men through the worst battle of the war. You saved thousands of lives when you held that position. I was supposed to bring them all home," Jake said quietly. "That was my job. I was their captain. They trusted me, and I let them down." The battle played in his mind again, like it did every night. The Zarathi ships dropping from the sky like angry metal birds. The sound of weapons firing all around them. His men falling one by one as they held the bridge that kept the enemy from reaching the evacuation ships. He could still hear their voices calling for help, calling his name as they died. "The war is over, Jake," Dr. Hayes said. "Earth won. The Zarathi have surrendered. Your sacrifice meant something." Jake stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, he could see Earth, hanging in space like a blue and white marble. The orbital station moved slowly around the planet, and from here everything looked peaceful. It was hard to believe that just months ago, humanity was fighting for its life against an alien empire that wanted to destroy them. "The war is over. For everyone else," Jake said. "For me, it never ends." Dr. Hayes made some notes on her tablet. "The new therapy treatments can help with the memories. The trauma does not have to control your life." I said no. Jake's voice was harder now. "I am fine the way I am." "You are not fine, Jake. You barely sleep. You do not eat enough. You avoid all the other veterans. This is not living." Jake turned away from the window. "Then maybe I should not be living." The words hung in the air between them. Dr. Hayes looked shocked, and Jake immediately felt bad for saying it. He did not really mean it, but sometimes the darkness in his mind made him say things like that. "I will be in my quarters," Jake said, and walked toward the door. "Jake, wait," Dr. Hayes called after him. "There is something you should know. A ship is coming tomorrow. The Galactic Council is sending representatives to meet with our leaders." Jake stopped at the door but did not turn around. "So what? Let the politicians deal with them. That is not my problem anymore. Admiral Collins wants all senior officers to attend the welcome ceremony. Then he can want all he likes. I am not going." Jake left the medical bay and walked through the corridors of the station. Other people moved past him, but they did not look at him directly. They looked at his scars in his metal arm and then looked away quickly. He was used to it now. He was a reminder of the war, of the price that was paid for victory. People did not like to be reminded of ugly things. His quarters were small and simple: a bed, a desk, a chair, and a small bathroom. On the desk was a picture of his team taken before their last mission. 12 young faces smiling at the camera, full of hope and confidence. They had believed in him completely. They had followed him into hell because they trusted him to bring them back. Jake picked up the picture and looked at each face. Danny Chen, who was only 19, and talked about his girlfriend back home. Mike Rodriguez, who could fix anything with his hands and always made jokes to keep spirits up. Sam Wilson, who carried extra rations for anyone who needed them. All gone now, all dead because their captain made the wrong choice at the wrong time. He put the picture face down on the desk and lay on his bed. Tomorrow there would be aliens on the station. Important aliens from important worlds, here to talk about the future. Jake wondered what they would think of humanity now that the war was over. Would they see humans as brave warriors who fought off a terrible enemy? Or would they see them as just another violent species that solved problems with weapons and death? It did not matter what they thought. Jake would stay in his quarters and let the important people handle the important business. He was just a broken soldier now, no use to anyone. His fighting days were over. His leading days were over. All he had left were the memories, and the guilt, and the faces of dead men who haunted his dreams. Outside his small window, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, alien ships were traveling toward Earth, carrying beings he could not imagine. Tomorrow would bring changes he could not predict, but Jake Morrison would not be part of any of it. He was done with being responsible for other people's lives. He was done with making decisions that got good people killed. He just wanted to be left alone with his ghosts and his guilt. The metal arm lay still at his side as he closed his eyes and tried not to dream of exploding ships and dying friends. Tomorrow, the aliens would come, but Jake would not be there to meet them. He had nothing left to offer anyone. The buzzing sound of his door alarm woke Jake from another nightmare. He sat up in bed, his metal hand automatically reaching for the weapon that was not there anymore. His heart was beating fast, and sweat covered his face. In his dream, he had been back on that bridge, watching his men die again. The alarm buzzed again. Jake looked at the clock and saw it was early morning. Who would be at his door at this time? He got up and pressed the button to open it. Lieutenant Kevin Adams stood in the hallway looking nervous. Kevin was young and eager. The kind of soldier Jake used to be before the war taught him how much it could cost to care about things. "Captain Morrison, sir," Kevin said. "Admiral Collins wants to see you in the command center right away." "Tell the Admiral I am not feeling well," Jake said, and started to close the door. "Sir, he said to tell you it is not a request. He said to bring you even if you do not want to come." Jake sighed and rubbed his scarred face. "Give me 5 minutes." He put on his uniform and looked at himself in the small mirror. The scars looked worse in the morning light, and his metal arm made the uniform hang strangely on his body. He was not the same man who had worn this uniform with pride 2 years ago. That man was dead, killed on the same bridge where his team died. The walk to the command center took 10 minutes through the busy corridors of the station. Jake kept his head down and tried to avoid the stares of other people. Some of them were veterans too, but they seemed to be handling things better than he was. They had jobs to do and lives to live. Jake envied them. Admiral Frank Collins was waiting in his office when Jake arrived. The Admiral was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had known Jake since before the war, when Jake was just another ambitious young officer with big dreams. "Sit down, Jake," the Admiral said. "We need to talk." Jake sat in the chair across from the Admiral's desk. Through the large window behind the desk, he could see a strange ship docked at the station. It was long and silver, with smooth curves. That looked nothing like human ships. Lights moved along its surface in patterns that seemed almost alive. "The Galactic Council representatives arrived last night," Admiral Collins said. 12 different species, all here to discuss humanity's future in galactic society. "That is good for humanity," Jake said. "What does it have to do with me?" Admiral Collins picked up a data pad and read from it. "They want to establish a permanent liaison program. Each major species will choose one human to serve as their cultural ambassador and military advisor. These humans will live among their people and help build understanding between our species. Jake shifted in his chair. Sounds like an important job. You should choose your best people for it. That is the thing, Jake. We do not get to choose. Each alien species gets to pick the human they want to work with. So pick them from the list of available volunteers. I am sure plenty of people would love the job. Admiral Collins set down the datapad and looked directly at Jake. One of them has already made their choice. Commander Zara Veltar of the Luminari has specifically requested you. Jake felt like someone had hit him in the stomach. What? That is impossible. I have never even met any of these aliens. How could one of them know who I am? The Luminari are telepathic, Jake. They can read minds from a distance. Commander Veltar has been studying the minds of everyone on this station since she arrived. She says you are exactly what she is looking for. Jake stood up quickly, his chair falling backward. No, absolutely not. I am not fit for any kind of important job. Find someone else. I cannot find someone else, Jake. She was very specific. She wants you, and only you. Then she made a mistake. Jake's voice was getting louder. Look at me, Admiral. I am broken. Half my face is scarred, my arm is gone, and I can barely get through a day without falling apart. Why would any advanced alien civilization want someone like me representing humanity? Admiral Collins walked around his desk and put his hand on Jake's shoulder. I do not know, son. But the Luminari do not make mistakes. They are one of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy. If Commander Veltar chose you, she had a good reason. Jake pulled away from the Admiral's touch. I cannot do this. I am not the man I used to be. That man died with my team on that bridge. Maybe that is exactly why she chose you, Admiral Collins said quietly. Maybe she sees something in you that you cannot see in yourself. Jake walked to the window and looked at the alien ship. Somewhere inside that beautiful vessel was a being who thought he was worth something. It made no sense to him. Every time he looked in a mirror, he saw failure and weakness. How could an alien see anything different? What if I refuse? Jake asked. You can refuse. No one will force you to take the job. But Jake, this could be a chance for you to start over, to do something important again. I had something important before. I was responsible for 12 good men, and I got them all killed. I am not going to be responsible for messing up relations between humanity and an entire alien species. Admiral Collins was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Your team knew the risks, Jake. They chose to follow you because they believed in you. They died heroes, saving thousands of innocent people. You honor their memory by giving up on yourself. The words hit Jake harder than he expected. He thought about his men, and what they would say if they could see him now. Would they want him to hide in his quarters for the rest of his life? Or would they want him to keep fighting, to keep trying to make a difference? When do I have to decide? Jake asked. Commander Veltar wants to meet with you this afternoon. You can talk to her, and then make your choice. Jake nodded slowly. I will meet with her, but I am not promising anything. That is all I can ask. As Jake walked back to his quarters, his mind was full of questions. Why would an advanced alien choose a broken human soldier? What could she possibly see in him that made her think he was worth anything? And most important of all, what would he say when she asked him to take on a responsibility he was sure he could not handle? The corridors seemed longer and darker as he made his way through the station. Other people moved around him, going about their normal lives, while his world was being turned upside down. In a few hours, he would meet with a being from another world who thought he was special somehow. The idea terrified him more than any battle he had ever fought. Back in his quarters, Jake sat on his bed and stared at the picture of his team. What would you guys do? He asked the silent faces. But of course, they could not answer him. He was on his own with this choice, just like he had been on his own when the bridge exploded and took everything he cared about with it. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first met Commander Zara Veltar, in the diplomatic quarters of the station. He had expected to refuse her offer immediately and return to his quiet life of guilt and regret. Instead, he found himself drawn into work he had not expected to enjoy. Zara was unlike any being Jake had ever encountered. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with silver skin that seemed to glow softly in any light. Her eyes were large and luminous, changing color from silver to pale blue depending on her mood. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that seemed to resonate inside his mind, though she assured him she was not using her telepathic abilities on him without permission. The work itself was more interesting than Jake had imagined. They spent their days creating protocols for human integration into the Galactic Council, discussing trade agreements, military cooperation, and cultural exchange programs. Zara had an incredible understanding of galactic politics, and to his surprise, she seemed genuinely interested in his opinions about human military strategy and culture. "Your people's approach to defensive warfare is remarkable," Zara said during one of their morning meetings. "The way you held the Zerathi at the Battle of Proxima Station showed creativity that most species would not consider." Jake looked up from the datapad he was reading. "We were desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. Perhaps," Zara said, tilting her head in a way that reminded Jake of a curious bird. "But I have studied the battles of many species. Desperation usually leads to panic and poor decisions. Your people seem to become more creative and determined when facing impossible odds. Maybe we are just too stupid to know when we are beaten," Jake said, trying to make a joke. Zara's eyes shifted to a warmer blue color. "I do not think stupidity explains your victory over an empire that had conquered 12 other species." These conversations happened daily now, and Jake found himself looking forward to them. Zara asked questions about everything from human art and music to their literature and philosophy. She wanted to understand not just how humans fought, but how they thought and felt and dreamed. "Tell me about your childhood," Zara said one afternoon as they reviewed mining rights agreements. "What did you want to be when you were young?" Jake set down his stylus and thought about the question. "I wanted to be a teacher. I loved learning about history and science. I thought I could help kids understand the world better." "What changed your mind?" "The war started when I was in college. Everyone was joining up to defend Earth. It felt wrong to stay in school while other people were fighting and dying for our survival." Zara made a soft sound that might have been understanding. "Do you regret that choice?" Jake touched his scarred face without thinking about it. "Sometimes, if I had stayed in school, maybe I would be teaching kids right now instead of ... He gestured at his metal arm. "Instead of helping to build peace between species that have never worked together before," Zara finished. "Instead of using your experience to prevent future wars." Jake had not thought about their work that way. To him, it was just meetings and paperwork and discussions about trade routes. But Zara was right. They were laying the foundation for a future where humans and aliens could live and work together without fear or mistrust. Over the weeks, Jake began to notice things about Zara that surprised him. Despite her species' reputation for cold logic and emotional control, she showed moments of what seemed like genuine feeling. She laughed at human jokes, even when they were not very funny. She asked about his nightmares and seemed genuinely concerned when he looked tired. She was curious about human food and music and art in ways that went beyond simple academic interest. One evening, they were working late in Zara's quarters, reviewing the final drafts of several trade agreements. The room was decorated with artifacts from many different worlds, and soft alien music played in the background. Jake had grown comfortable in this space over the past weeks, though he still felt like an imposter sitting across from such an advanced being. "Jake," Zara said, looking up from her datapad. "May I ask you something personal?" "Sure," Jake said, though he tensed up a little. Personal questions usually led to discussions about the war and his dead team. "Why do you think so little of yourself?" The question caught Jake off guard. What do you mean? I have worked with many beings from many species, Zara said. I have never met anyone who seemed so determined to convince others that they have no value. Jake felt heat rise in his face. I do not do that. You do, Zara said gently. Every day, you find ways to diminish your contributions to our work. When I praise your insights, you say you were just guessing. When I compliment your strategic thinking, you say anyone could have done the same thing. When I tell you that your ideas have helped me understand humanity better, you change the subject. Jake stood up and walked to the viewport that looked out at the stars. Maybe because I know what I am, and you do not. What are you, Jake? Jake's hands clenched into fists, the metal fingers of his prosthetic making soft clicking sounds. I am a failure. I am a broken soldier who could not protect his own men. I am a coward who hides in meetings and paperwork instead of facing what he did. That is not what I see when I look at you. Then you are not looking hard enough, Jake said, his voice getting louder. Look at these scars, Zara. Look at this arm. Look at the way I jump every time there is a loud noise, or the way I cannot sleep through the night without dreaming about dead friends. Jake turned around to face her, and all the frustration and confusion he had been holding in for weeks finally boiled over. I have to ask, he said, his voice cracking slightly. With all the heroes Earth has produced, all the brilliant minds and perfect specimens of humanity, why would you want me? The question hung in the air between them, like a challenge. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest as he continued. I am broken, Zara. I am scarred inside and out. I have nightmares every night about watching good people die because I made the wrong choices. I could not save my own team, the people who trusted me most. What could someone like you possibly see in someone like me? Zara set down her datapad and stood up slowly. For a long moment, she just looked at him with those luminous silver eyes, and Jake wondered if he had finally pushed too far. Maybe she would realize her mistake now and ask for someone else to take his place. But instead of anger or disappointment, Jake saw something in her expression that he could not identify, something profound and gentle and almost heartbreaking. She moved to the viewport and gazed out at the stars, and when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. Do you know what my people see when we use our telepathic abilities, Jake? Zara stood at the viewport for what felt like a long time, her silver form outlined against the backdrop of stars. Jake waited, hardly breathing, for her answer to his desperate question. He had finally said the words that had been eating at him for weeks, and now he was terrified of what she might say in response. When Zara finally spoke, her voice was different than he had ever heard it before. Softer, more musical, but also carrying a weight that made Jake listen with every part of his being. We see thoughts. Yes, she said, still looking out at the stars. But more than that, we see the essence of a being, their true nature, the core of what makes them who they are. She turned back to him, and Jake saw that her eyes had shifted to a deep, warm blue that seemed to glow in the dim light of her quarters. Your so-called heroes, your perfect specimens, Zara continued, walking slowly toward him. When I touch their minds, I see strength, yes, intelligence, courage, determination, all admirable qualities that would serve well in many situations. Jake felt his heart beating faster as she came closer. There was something in her manner, something in the way she moved and spoke, that told him this conversation was more important than anything they had discussed before. But there is something else I see in them, Zara said, stopping just a few feet away from him. Something that troubles me deeply. What? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I see limits, Zara said. I see beings who have never truly been tested, never truly broken, never truly failed at something that mattered to them. They are like beautiful swords that have never been used in battle, shiny and perfect and untested, but without the strength that only comes from being forged in fire. Jake stared at her, not understanding where she was going with this. When I first arrived at this station, Zara continued, I spent 3 days reading the minds of every senior human officer, every decorated hero, every brilliant scientist and skilled diplomat. I was looking for someone to represent humanity in the most important cultural exchange program in galactic history. She reached out slowly and touched the scars on the left side of his face with her long silver fingers. Her touch was warm and gentle, and Jake felt something like electricity pass between them. But when I looked into your mind, Jake Morrison, I saw something extraordinary. Something I had never encountered in any being from any species in all my years of diplomatic service. Jake's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for months. What did you see? I saw a soul that had been shattered and chose to rebuild itself, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw strength that was forged in the fires of loss and failure. I saw compassion born from suffering, wisdom earned through pain, and courage that exists, not because you have never been afraid, but because you choose to act despite your fear. The tears were flowing freely down Jake's cheeks now, both on his scarred side and his undamaged side. No one had ever described him the way Zara was describing him. No one had ever seen anything in him except the broken soldier who had failed his team. Your species has a saying, Zara continued, still touching his face. What does not kill you makes you stronger. But that is not quite right, is it? What does not kill you gives you a choice to become bitter or to become wise, to close your heart or to open it wider, to let the pain destroy you or to let it teach you how to help others who are in pain. Jake could not speak. The words were there in his throat, but they would not come out. You ask why I would want you. Zara's other hand came up to touch the other side of his face, framing his scarred features between her silver palms. Because in a galaxy full of beings who have never truly failed, never truly lost everything, and found the strength to continue, you represent something precious and rare. She leaned closer to him, and Jake could see his own reflection in her luminous eyes. You are not broken, Jake Morrison. You are battle-tested. You are proof that humanity's greatest strength is not in never falling down. It is in how you rise after you fall. The words hit Jake like a physical blow, but instead of pain, he felt something he had not experienced in months, hope, for the first time since the bridge exploded and took his team with it. Jake began to see himself through someone else's eyes. Not as a failure, not as a broken soldier, but as someone who had survived the worst thing imaginable and chosen to keep going. The guilt you carry, Zara said, reading the thoughts he could not hide. The nightmares, the pain, the scars, both visible and invisible. These are not signs of weakness, Jake. They are signs that you cared deeply about the people you led. They are signs that their deaths mattered to you. They are signs that you are still human, despite everything you have been through. Jake finally found his voice, but I failed them. I was supposed to bring them home. You were supposed to complete a mission that would save thousands of innocent lives, Zara corrected gently. You were supposed to hold a position against impossible odds until the evacuation ships could escape. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, and because of that, those ships got away safely. My men died. Your men died as heroes, fighting for something bigger than themselves. And their captain, the man they trusted and followed, made sure their sacrifice meant something. That is not failure, Jake. That is the most profound kind of success. Zara stepped back slightly, but kept her hands on his face. I have read the reports of that battle. I have seen the tactical analysis. What you and your team did on that bridge was impossible. 12 men held off an entire Zarathi assault force for 6 hours. Military experts from 3 different species have studied that battle and concluded that it should not have been possible. We got lucky, Jake said weakly. No, Zara said firmly. You were brilliant. You were brave. You were exactly the kind of leader that your men needed in that moment. And when the bridge exploded and you were the only one who survived, you carried their memory with you. You made sure that their sacrifice was not forgotten. Jake closed his eyes and felt the weight of months of guilt and self-hatred begin to shift. It was not gone, might never be completely gone, but for the first time it did not feel like it was crushing him. "That is why I chose you," Zara said. "Not despite your brokenness, but because of what you became after being broken. Not despite your scars, but because of the strengths they represent. Not despite your failure, but because of how you have carried that failure and learned from it." She let her hands fall to her sides, but her eyes never left his face. "The galaxy is full of species that have never been truly tested," Zara said. "They are strong and smart and capable, but they do not understand resilience. They do not understand how to rebuild after being destroyed. They do not understand how to find hope in the darkest places." Jake opened his eyes and looked at her. "Humanity does understand these things," Zara continued. "And you, Jake Morrison, understand them better than anyone else I have ever met. That is why I want you. That is why I need you. Because the challenges we will face in building this new galactic community will require exactly the kind of strength that can only come from having been broken and choosing to heal." In the days that followed Zara's revelation, Jake felt like he was seeing the world with new eyes. The scars on his face that he had viewed as marks of failure, Zara helped him understand as evidence of survival. The nightmares that woke him every night, which he had considered signs of weakness. She explained were his mind's way of processing and healing from trauma. Even his metal arm, which had felt like a constant reminder of everything he had lost, began to seem like proof of his determination to keep going despite the odds. Their work together took on new meaning as well. Jake realized that Zara had not chosen him to work on trade agreements and cultural protocols despite his experiences with loss and recovery. She had chosen him because those experiences gave him insights that Earth's perfect representatives could never possess when they discussed military cooperation between species. Jake's understanding of what it meant to lose everything in battle helped him see problems that others might miss. When they worked on emergency response procedures, his knowledge of how people reacted under extreme stress made their plans more realistic and effective. The first major test of this new understanding came when they attended their first full Galactic Council session. Jake had been nervous about representing humanity in front of beings from dozens of different worlds, but Zara had insisted he was ready. As they walked into the massive council chamber, Jake was amazed by the diversity of life forms around them. There were beings made of crystal that sang when they spoke, creatures that looked like walking trees with glowing fruit for eyes, and others that seemed to be made entirely of shifting light and energy. To Jake's surprise, he was not the only human liaison present. As the session began, he met the other representatives chosen by different alien species, and a pattern began to emerge that shocked him. The Crystalline Collective had chosen Maria Santos, a former refugee who had lost her entire family in the early days of the war and spent 3 years in displacement camps before rebuilding her life as a social worker. The hive mind of Kepler had selected Ben Parker, a brilliant scientist whose research team had been killed in a lab accident that everyone blamed on his negligence, even though an investigation later proved it was not his fault. During a break in the proceedings, Jake found himself talking with Maria and Ben in a quiet corner of the chamber. All three of them had been confused by their selection, wondering why advanced alien civilizations would choose damaged humans instead of perfect ones. "Do you see it now?" Zara asked, appearing beside them with that silent grace she had perfected. "Each of our species chose not your strongest or smartest or most accomplished. We chose your most resilient, your most human." Jake watched as Maria negotiated a complex refugee resettlement agreement with a patience and empathy that came directly from her own experiences with displacement and loss. Her understanding of what it meant to lose everything and start over gave her insights into the needs of displaced populations that no academic study could provide. Ben's presentation on interspecies scientific cooperation included safeguards and ethical considerations that were shaped by his deep understanding of how quickly things could go wrong and how devastating the consequences could be. "We have been watching your species for decades," Zara explained to the three humans. "Long before the war with the Zerathi, we have studied how humans respond to adversity, how you grow from failure, how you find strength in vulnerability. These are not common traits in the galaxy." The final revelation came when the Council voted on humanity's full membership in the galactic community. Jake had expected long debates and careful consideration of humanity's technological capabilities, military strength, and resource potential. Instead, the debate was swift, and the vote was unanimous in favor of acceptance. But the reasons given surprised everyone in the chamber. The ancient Archon spokesperson, a being so old that his species had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire, rose to address the assembly. His voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. "We welcome humanity not for their technology, though it shows promise," the Archon said. "We welcome them not for their military might, though they have proven themselves capable warriors. We welcome them not for their resources, though their world is rich and beautiful." Jake felt his heart beating faster as the ancient being continued. "We welcome humanity because they have mastered something that most species never learn, something that we ourselves have forgotten in our long existence. They have learned how to transform suffering into wisdom, failure into strength, brokenness into beauty. They have learned that the greatest victories come not from never falling down, but from how gracefully and determinedly they rise after each fall." The chamber was completely silent as the Archon's words sank in. Jake looked around at the assembled representatives of dozens of worlds and saw something he had not expected to see in their alien faces. Respect, not for humanity's weapons, or ships, or conquests, but for their ability to heal and grow and become stronger after being hurt. As the session ended, and the various delegations began to disperse, Zara approached Jake with something in her hands. It was a small crystal that glowed with the same soft silver light as her skin. "This is a memory crystal," she explained, placing it gently in his palm. "It contains the moment I first looked into your mind and saw what you truly are. Whenever you doubt yourself again, whenever the darkness tries to convince you that you are broken and worthless, touch this crystal and remember what I saw in you." Jake closed his metal fingers around the crystal and felt its warmth spread through his artificial hand. For a moment, he could sense what Zara had sensed when she first encountered his mind. He saw himself not as a failed soldier, but as a survivor, not as a broken man, but as someone who had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, not as a burden to humanity, but as an example of what humans could become when they refused to give up. "I have been assigned as humanity's permanent liaison to the Luminari homeworld," Jake said. "Will you be working with me there?" Zara's eyes shifted to that warm blue color that Jake had learned meant she was happy. "I have requested a transfer to the Human Cultural Exchange Program. If you will have me, I would like to continue our partnership." Jake smiled, and for the first time in months it felt completely natural. "I think I would like that very much." As they prepared to leave the council chamber, Jake looked out through the massive viewport at the stars beyond. They no longer seemed cold and distant to him. Instead, they looked like destinations waiting to be explored, worlds full of beings who could benefit from humanity's unique gift to the galaxy, the gift of resilience, of hope in the face of despair, of the strength that could only come from being broken and choosing to heal. He thought about his team, the 12 good men who had died on that bridge so long ago. For the first time since their deaths, Jake felt like he understood what they would want him to do with the life they had helped him keep. They would want him to use his pain to help others who were in pain. They would want him to use his failure to help others avoid the same mistakes. Most of all, they would want him to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today. Jake Morrison had spent months thinking of himself as a broken soldier with nothing left to offer. Now he understood that he was something far more valuable. He was proof that humans could survive anything, overcome anything, and grow stronger from anything. In a galaxy full of perfect beings who had never been tested, that made him exactly what the universe needed. The crystal in his palm pulsed with gentle light as he and Zara walked toward their new future together, carrying humanity's greatest gift to the stars.